Hello there friends and welcome! Today we have a very special guide, my first ever Rogue Trader video as the game was just recently released. And we'll be going with the ultimate best beginner tips so that you can have a very fun time even on unfair. By the way, all footage you'll see here is on unfair mode. We'll cover how the most important mechanics of the game work, including even how to achieve some very fun stuff like 100% critical chance even early, the same for stat bonuses and ability stacking, trading, your limit breaks, so heroic actions and desperate measures, how to ambush enemies, and most importantly, how to fully use one of the most OP archetypes for a super easy time even early on unfair mode. Everything is here in one neat little package. So without further ado, let us get into our best beginner tips guide for Warhammer 40K Rogue Trader. The very first mechanic I want to cover is ability bonus, because I don't think the game does a good job at explaining how to calculate it at all. And if you, for example, check your skills, talents and abilities, you'll notice almost everything scales based on bonus. But when you highlight the bonus option, it doesn't really tell you much, unfortunately. It's actually your final stat value, that's the main stat here, divided by 10. That's right, 1/10 of your final stat value after modifiers have been applied, including buffs. For example, Argenta has 60 agility. 60 by 10, 6, which means her Revel in Slaughter ability will grant her plus 6% critical hit chance because it's equal to her agility bonus. It is not actually the number to the side, unlike in Pathfinder or Dungeons and Dragons like Baldur's Gate. The little number here, like a +5, it's only the modifiers applied to your skill value. The good thing is, when you check your abilities in-game, like Revel in Slaughter here, it will automatically calculate the bonus for you, including the final formula results. Sadly, your ability bonus will always be rounded down if it doesn't end up with an even score. For example, Argenta's agility is at 79, very close to 80, but still not 80. Which is why her very same Revel in Slaughter ability will only provide a 7 extra critical chance. Now let us go over the main combat mechanics. You'll notice that as soon as battle starts and you are detected by the enemies, your party will go into the so-called strategy round. This allows you to properly position your party members before battle truly starts and everyone gets their turn. Ideally, of course, you want to prepare your characters behind cover so they get to protect themselves, but for melee characters, you might prefer to be behind cover and close enough to the enemies to attack them easier. Note that you cannot spawn directly on top of the enemies, that's why there's a little red square here, you have to be at the very least one square away from them. Lastly, it's important to note that depending on your party formation, you can easily access it by pressing escape, then formation. Whoever starts at the front will be able to move further during the strategy round. Another thing is, even before battle truly starts, you can already check the initiative results, and it actually goes from bottom to top, right? So the first enemy that will act is the Rebel Agitator here. But anyways, you should also use this when properly positioning your characters. For example, this guy here is melee, and if I position Abelard here, because he's gonna act fast, the Minuteman Rebel will definitely be able to move to where I am and also attack me. If you right click the enemies, you can check their stats, even movement points, whatever weapons they have equipped, and even if they're under any buffs or debuffs or special qualities. Much better if you do it before battle starts, during the strategy round, of course. Lastly, if your characters get ambushed, which can happen in a few battles, you will pretty much lose the strategy round, which means you will not be able to properly position your characters before battle starts at all. It's just going to depend on your party formation. And speaking about ambushes, don't forget you can also ambush enemies, so long as they haven't detected you yet, by attacking out of battle like I do with Idira and my main character here. But because battle will start as soon as the first attack hits, it's best to try and attack with multiple characters at once. Easy when they have the same animation for whatever you're using to ambush the enemies with, like the Arc Lightning spell from the Psyker's Staff. Now let's go over some gameplay basics. First, starting with movement and attacking. At the start of your character's turn, you'll get to move, equal to the green squares here, and you can move just a little bit, even return, but of course you'll get less and less as you do this. Now this is very important. Some abilities, especially attacks or offensive skills, well, when you use them, you'll notice two little icons to the side here. The first means it will spend all movement points. Therefore, if you attack, let's say with Argenta's normal shot here, notice that she cannot move anymore, right? Because she spent all her movement points by attacking. Therefore, it's very important to check if the ability you're going to use will spend all your movement points or not. As I said, mostly all of the offensive actions do, but some don't. What this means is the only way to move afterwards is to use some abilities like, for example, Argenta as a soldier can get dash, which lets her move even after attacking, in a 3-cell radius. Second, offensive actions also are usually limited to just once per turn, which is why by attacking, we not only spend all of our movements, but cannot attack anymore.
I will not.
Including with other offensive actions, like for example, the Deadeye shot, which is different from the normal attack from the sniper rifle. However, there are ways of overcoming these limitations, usually through other abilities. For example, Argenta as a soldier has access to run and gun at the cost of 1 AP. She gets to restore a lot of movement points and even attack once more. So by activating this,
as the Emperor commands, I act.
She can now move again and also attack again, most importantly, as to kill another enemy. Soldiers can even use the Revel in Slaughter ability to recover run and gun uses on the next turn. It's always important to check whatever attack or ability you have by right-clicking on it to see if it will prevent movement and further attacks. Buffs usually don't, like Word of the Emperor here, we can still move and attack, the same for Shield of the Emperor, or Voice of Command. Another very good example is the Charge ability from the Warrior archetype, which Abelard starts with. Basically the archetype for melee characters. With Charge you can move, get the extra damage from it, and then still retain the ability to attack right after, but it will prevent your movement. Another very important mechanic to master is Heroic Acts, which are pretty much your ultimate, most powerful abilities of them all. Every archetype has a unique one. For Officer, its Finest Hour, for Operative, Dismantling Attack, and so on. You'll always learn them automatically starting from level 4. Your heroic measures are directly tied to your momentum gauge, which is the one right here, above your abilities. The higher your momentum, the better, because once it reaches 175 or higher, you'll get to use your heroic act. It's once per character per battle. And some are so good, well, you can pretty much destroy entire armies of enemies in just one turn before they can even react. How to increase momentum, however? Well, at the very start of your character's turn, each ally will increase the momentum gauge equal to their resolve. For Pascal, for example, it's 4. But if you're playing on hard or unfair, you'll have a penalty to momentum generation. There are other ways of buffing resolve further, through for example the Air of Authority ability from Officer. The same for Voice of Command, because it directly increases all your attributes, and Resolve is directly tied to your Fellowship score. Resolve can also be acquired by killing enemies. For example, let's deal with the Cultist here. There we go. And it's going to be an amount that will be further enhanced or reduced depending on the enemy tier. Because the Cultist was pretty weak, our momentum gain was reduced by half. Even then, ideally it's best to focus on the weaker enemies first. Because like I said, when you kill an enemy, you get resolve. And look at that, we already have our first heroic action. Ideally, I'd rather my Officer use it because I find it should be the best overall. Because the momentum gauge will max out at around 200, you can still kill more enemies until you get to that point, instead of having to automatically spam it with the first character you have. For example, we can now use Finest Hour on Argenta to grant her a full extra turn with no attack limitation at all. And because we used a heroic action, our momentum gauge was reduced. But like I said, the effects are so powerful allowing you to perform so many attacks per round that they are worth it. Plus, even after spending your first use with a heroic act, your character will keep increasing resolve on further kills, as you can see. Which means very soon, we'll get full momentum again. Now be careful, because you can also take big hits to your momentum gauge by most importantly taking damage, especially injuries. Injuries happen depending on how high the damage you take compared to your maximum hit points, and well, the higher the difficulty, the easier it is to get injuries. For example, for unfair, 30% is already enough to get an injury, while for daring, the true normal, you'll need to take 50% damage first. Be careful, because if you get enough injuries, they will automatically be converted into a trauma, which is a permanent debuff that lasts until you return to your ship. As a saving grace, having enough low momentum does let you perform your desperate measures, however, but they often have a downside, unlike the heroic ones. Besides the penalties from desperate measures, well, it's way better to rely on heroic acts, because it's far easier to manipulate them. After all, things have to be going south for you to actually get a desperate measure. Now let us cover how stacking stats and parameters work in the game, such as 2 hits chance and most importantly critical hits chance, because they are tied to one another. To start, it's important to note that most of the buffs you get in the game stack addictively on top of each other, that's right, which is why we have a 100% critical chance here, despite just being level 8. Everything from the top to the bottom being added on top of each other. Kinda rare for a game like this, but hey, I absolutely love it. Most of which, all because we increased our 2 hits chance by such high amounts, right? Plus 55%. Over 95. And once again, everything is stacking addictively. We actually go above 100% critical chance. We have 114, as if that was not enough. The same is true for other modifiers. You can see everything being added addictively here. Just look at our camaraderie bonus for higher damage, plus 104%, by just being surrounded by our allies. Once again, everything on unfair, and super early in the game. So let's go for another critical. There we go, critical hit again. This time we had less critical hit chance, because we used run and gun, which reduces our ballistic skills. And the easiest way to increase it, as far as ranged attacks anyways, is first through the officer archetype, voice of command ability further boosted by the focus talent, and most importantly reveling slaughter from the soldier themselves. So our Argenta has 100, just at level 8. Lastly, the enemy's dodge and also cover are different than your actual 2-hit chances. Notice that the cover 2-hit chance and the dodge rolls are separate from your 2-hit chance. Which means by reducing the enemy's dodge or their cover chance, you will not increase the critical chance of your attacks, unlike 2-hit chance. Just look at that, 213% critical chance. Now let's go over the main difficulty options. Normal, well, it's actually not true normal, because as you can see here, it does give some benefits to party members with penalties to enemies. Daring is the true normal of the game. And for your first time, if you're used to cRPGs, you can definitely go with this. But anyway, starting from hard, enemies already begin acquiring some extra bonuses, with the highest being on unfair. However, I am very pleased to say that unlike in the Pathfinder games, unfair is done in a much better way in Rogue Trader. Because, as you can see here, while the enemies do get loads of bonuses, it's not added right at once when your characters are at their weakest, like level 1. Rather, the modifiers will increase gradually up to the final values there by the end of chapter 1. So when your characters are still at their weakest and you're still developing your characters with their main abilities, gear and so on, unfair won't be so overwhelming. Because by the end of chapter 1, well, your characters are already quite powerful, enough to fully handle all of the unfair bonuses. And speaking about unfair, well, I promised some tips for... And speaking about unfair, well, I did promise some tips for it, so I might as well start now. I did find it to be easier than in Pathfinder, if only because of one very simple thing. the officer archetype, which of course you can already start the game with, and there's 2 officer story party members. I'll of course explain everything about officer in depth in my main officer guide, but for this one, to put it simply, it is the class all about not only buffing characters through their main power voice of command, but also granting your allies extra turns. There's really no words to say how powerful this can be, because the more officers you have, the more turns you can keep on granting to, let's say, your most powerful damage dealer characters, like Argenta as a sniper. Just as a quick example of how powerful the officer archetype can be, I have 4 officers here, my main character Cassia and 2 mercenaries. We are still level 7. Battle has started, but because of the Seize the Initiative officer unique talent, all my officers act first before the enemies. Ideally you want to first buff your main damage dealer, which is Argenta for me, my main sniper. So let's start with Voice of Command.
All too easy.
And Air of Authority for higher momentum. We pass, but now, since I said we have extra turns from the Seize feat, Cassia can provide Argenta with an extra turn from Bring It Down. Argenta can then start by killing the weaker enemies to generate momentum. Ideally the ones you can one-shot. We already got a critical at 83% critical chance. She can use run and gun to attack again. So let's go for this other prisoner. And there we go. Now Fierce Recital for more momentum gains. We are almost at max momentum for our heroic acts. If you were playing on the easier difficulty modes because of the 25% penalty from unfair, well, chances are you'd be already at high momentum. But anyways, because we have more officers, guess what? I can grant Argenta another turn.
Actions will speak louder
She can now
than
activate
words.
Revel in Slaughter
Faith
to
without
refresh her
deeds
run
is
and gun, but
worthless.
first let's attack normally. Kill this awoken prisoner here. One shot with 70 damage, just at level 7 on unfair. With that very tasty 100% crits, 130% extra damage just from being surrounded by allies. Anyways, run and gun to attack again. There we go. We still have another officer, our main character. We can grant Argenta yet another turn. And it's pretty much the same. Reveling Slaughter, attack. Bam, high momentum. But ideally, you'll want to use the heroic action of your officers to grant Argenta a true full turn with no attack limitation. Don't bother with her own heroic action. So let's just use run and gun again.
Commands, I act.
And try to kill this one here, but he's behind cover on unfair. That's way harder to hit. Thankfully we got it. It's gonna swap back to our main character, because that's what happens when you use Bring It Down. And he can then use his finest, our heroic act. So now dear Argenta has a full turn with no attack limitation and 5 AP. Let's just remove the win that penalty from run and gun first. Well, and she can just start sniping everything into submission. Especially the sniper enemy here, with full criticals and one-shots. What this means is the boss is the only one left. And guess what? Not a single enemy got to act at all on unfair, even early game. That's how powerful officers can be. Of course you don't need so many in your party. I'd say 2 is ideal, 3 is quite powerful, more than that super OP. But anyways, even the boss is easily handled. And speaking about unfair, recruiting mercenaries can really help enhance your party, especially for the very early parts of the game where, well, you won't be at full party members yet. Doing so is very simple. Right after the prologue, simply speak to the High Factotum Generis Damrock here. Then scroll down and choose I wish to bolster my retinue with skilled fighters. This will let you recruit a fully customizable mercenary from scratch, which will also fully scale to your level. There's only one cost, profit factor. For each mercenary you recruit, you'll get -1 to your profit factor. As I'll explain very soon, this is something directly tied to trading. But trust me, having a full scaling mercenary for just one profit factor, it more than makes up for that. Later in the game you'll have loads and loads of ways of generating more and more profit factor anyways. Now let's cover how trading works in Rogue Trader. And honestly, it's pretty simple, but also done in a very unique way. Trading is directly tied to your profit factor, which is not increased by selling items at all, rather by, well, some quests and dialogue options. The higher your profit factor, the more items you'll be able to acquire from each of the game's factions. For example, my character has 15, and to grab the multi-keys I need 6 profit factor or 7 for the analyst's helmet. As I just said, you can trade with each different faction, but for that you also need to increase your reputation with them, which is done by selling all of the cargo components you find as exploring. Each has a different type that also increases more or less reputation depending on the faction. For the Explorators faction, for example, Holy Gifts and the Heretic trophies are the best for increasing faction reputation. Besides exploring, you can always just send gear that you won't use to cargo by right-clicking on it and add to cargo, which will of course create more armor or weapon kits. Be sure to do so with all the stuff you aren't going to be using anyways. There's no point in not doing it. As I said, trading requires both profit factor but also reputation. By default, with the Explorators faction and 0 reputation, you can only get the multi-keys and the Analyst's helmet. However, so long as you meet the necessary thresholds, you don't spend profit factor or faction reputation to grab the items at all. You can just get them right out of the bat, just like this. For the rest, however, we need to first increase our reputation, so let's do that. For this guy's purpose, I'll just sell everything I have for the maximum reputation gain. And there we go, we have close enough to 5 reputation even. Remember that, as I said, it won't cost you anything to grab the items so long as you meet the necessary thresholds. You can just grab everything now, and that's it. Nothing will be reducted, you don't have to buy it at all, it's just given to you once you select it, so long as you meet the thresholds. We can basically grab almost everything besides the items that we don't have enough profit factor for. And that's pretty much it. Now, before finishing this guide, I just want to go over what I find to be the best order for doing the early areas of the game, all during Chapter 1 still. Ideally, first you want to of course recruit mercenaries, so you have 6 party members, but after that be sure to head to Euroc 5, which is where you'll get Cassia the Navigator, one of the best party members in the game. Plus, it's here that you'll find the best sniper rifle for Act 1. After that, you can go to Recruit here, the prison planetoid. There's a boss battle, but it's pretty easy, and some gear. Thunderfang is just a merchant vessel, but early on you won't have enough items to sell for enough reputation. Meanwhile, Recruit Mercenaries is what you should save for last, because it's not only the biggest dungeon and planet of Chapter 1, it's also where you fight multiple bosses, including the final Chapter 1 boss. But before that, you can always go back to Thunderfang and buy all the important gear. There's also another merchant here, with another faction. Do note, however, that for the first 4 to 5 battles, you will not be able to return to your ship. So be sure to keep a save before, because, well, if you get a lot of permanent injuries and traumas, that is debuffs, you won't be able to get to the ship to rest until you deal with a certain battle. Well, alright friends, so this was it for my first ever Rogue Trader Ultimate Beginner Tips guide. If you found it useful, as always, please remember to like, subscribe, and also consider becoming a channel member if you can. I'd really appreciate your support. The next guide will most definitely be a character creation guide where I go over the best stats, archetypes, homeworlds, backgrounds, and so on. And after that, we can finally get started into our party member builds. Thank you for watching, and see you next time, friends.